Hello, everyone. We are so excited to be back at San Diego State University with two special guests, Dr. Adisa Akebulan, who is the Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of Africana Studies, and then we also have the California Secretary of State, Dr. Shirley Weber. Really excited to be with both of you today.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
Want to get started with just a question around civic engagement in general. Going into the 2024 election cycle, obviously voting is a pretty large topic for Democratic side and Republican side, figuring out how to activate voters of all age ranges, demographics. Curious as to your thoughts on the general sense of civic engagement.
Well, fortunately, we're involved in a lot of civic engagement activities at the state level, at the Secretary of State's office. In fact, this summer is focused upon getting more people registered to vote, but equally important, getting them to think about turnout, to make voting a part of their lifestyle, rather than just something that happens every 3 or 4 years that you think about. And so one of the things that we're doing, we've done a lot of things in California to make it easy to vote. Everybody in California gets a ballot by mail. They have 11 days to vote, so they can actually vote by mailing it in. They can turn it into a voting box. They can go to vote centers and all those things. So we've done it, made it very easy. We've made it available to everyone who's not physically sitting in a federal prison. If you're not in a federal prison for felony, you're eligible to vote, even if you're sitting in jail in California. So everyone has access to voting, and so we've made it very easy. One of the things we haven't done, and we looked at that, is that we have not told people why they should vote. We've made it easy, accessible, plenty of places to vote, plenty of time to vote, but a lot of people don't know why they vote. And they may vote if there's somebody that they like, but they have no concept of politics and how political issues are raised and how things get done and what the voting history of a people mean to a constituent and to a person who's going to run for office. So as a result, we haven't figured out why we should vote. And that's what we're doing this summer in something that we call Freedom Summer 2, which is taken off of 1964, the Freedom Summer, with Fannie Lou Hamer and everybody. So we're doing something to help young people and older folks as well to understand how central voting is. It's not just your responsibility and your duty, it is your life. Is a definition of who you are.
Wow.
And it's your power that you have to be able to bring change for yourself and for your family. So we're working on the why this summer with our Freedom Summer 2.
Thank you.
And that question, why should we vote, is so important and something we're trying to target for our demographic of 18 to 25-year-olds. And so getting that message across to our generation, it seems to be a little more difficult. And so what advice would you have for 18 to 25-year-olds, and how do you change kind of your messaging when targeting these younger people?
Well, what I've done when I meet with a lot of high school students, and we have a whole program that deals with college-age students, and college students register on the campuses to vote by law. All of it's on there. When they register for classes, they can register for vote in all of the California institutions. But we talk about why you vote and what happens when you don't vote, which is extremely important. And as a former school board member and an assembly person, to know what people think about a community that doesn't vote, if you knew what they thought about you, you'd go vote, because they disempower you in every decision that is made. You're not the main consideration and concern for you and for them and for anybody else. And so when you don't vote, it's not like nothing happens. I tell high school students and college students too that when you decide not to vote, you disempower yourself, and you would then empower somebody else with your power. Because what happens if mathematically, if there's 10 people in a room and you have 1/10 of the vote, when you decide that you're not going to vote, that doesn't mean that vote goes off in the air and never comes back. That means the people who are sitting at the table, the 9 of them, got a percentage of your vote. And it takes less people then to get things done, which means the issues that you raise will not be addressed because you didn't vote. And people need to understand that they end up giving away their power. Or if I'm on a school board and I discover that my district only votes in 30%, yet the affluent communities vote at 100, even though my district is larger than theirs, they have a tendency to dismiss my district and dismiss the issues we want. Why? Because we can't vote them in and we can't vote them out because we don't vote.
And
so in speaking about your why, and how that why is so important in encouraging people to use their vote, can you talk about some of your experiences and some of the things that developed your why in terms of going to ballot polls?
You know, the interesting thing in my personal life is that my grandfather never voted in this country because he died before 1965, even though he was born in the 1800s. My father never voted till he became an adult. I mean, like 30, 40 years old, because they came from Arkansas, and Arkansas didn't allow them to vote. And so it helps to understand for young people how folks felt so disenfranchised, because you had no ability to control your life. You know, you couldn't elect the new mayor, you couldn't elect the city council, you couldn't do any of those things that we call to get representative government. And so as a result, the why comes in when you look at all the stuff we've struggled to get and we can't get any attention. It's difficult as an elected official when I was passing bills and things in the assembly. You know, I had to struggle hard to get all of the other people to vote with me, because the district that we represented did not have, most of us didn't have much power in those districts in terms of the number of people who were actually voting. And then to talk to a governor or a person who's trying to run for some statewide office, you have to really amass an awful lot of support from other people rather than your district and your community, because your people don't vote. And when you say, well, we're not a big population in California, the Jewish population is not very big in the nation, period. Yet they vote 80 and 90% every election. So they know that if you're not giving them money in Congress, they'll vote you out. And that happens. And so people are very conscious of those elected officials, are very conscious of those communities that do vote. And that's why you should go vote, because it's your power. It's the only way you have a voice that is sustainable, that can get things done. But equally important, it's the only way you can support people who fight for you. You know, that you have many of your elected officials who are raising issues that nobody wants to hear. How can you keep that person in office? They're vulnerable if you don't go vote.
I didn't think of it like that. Voting as sort of a protection method for those who you're putting in office to represent you.
That's right, a protection method, and they think twice about going against you if you vote. You see, and so that becomes important. I look at the things that I've done, and I always insisted that my district, and it had very good voting records, that my district that was poor, black, and Latino, that everybody went to vote. And they would always say, oh, you're going to get elected anyway, Dr. Weber. I said, that's not the issue. The issue is you have to show your power to them so that when I'm fighting the police and putting in bills that deal with lethal force or having people vote who were once incarcerated, they understand that there's some protection of you because your people will go out and protect you. Wow. But if you don't go at all, you become a casualty.
Wow.
And then people get bitter, and I've seen black folks who refuse to do things in their own community because they're afraid of what will happen to them by the outside forces that will be organized against them. Even though they represent a small district that's mostly us and a few others, they're hesitant about taking any step to move forward because law enforcement dislikes them. They'll walk in and spend $1 million to try to discredit the person.
And Dr. Alkebulan, I'm curious, you're an associate professor here at San Diego State University, curious as to things you hear from college students and even your own colleagues around voting.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the challenges, and Dr. Weber also touched on this, is to connect not only the broader community, but students with the political process. Mm-hmm. A lot of people don't really have a political education, don't necessarily know what kind of measures are on the ballot, what are some of the pressing political issues that are, going on in their community. So one of the challenges, even on college campuses, is to provide students with some kind of political education to, not only inspire them, to vote, but to have a big or a greater or tighter grasp of what they should think about voting for. Mm-hmm. So that's one of the challenges. There are a lot of students on campus that unfortunately don't see the importance or the significance of voting. So those are the challenges that we have on campus. But just like in the broader society, all students don't think about things in the same way. There are groups of students who are, civically minded and engaged. For example, the things that I've never heard of, what you're doing. I think it's an amazing thing, and not just for college students, but for Black male college students. One of the smallest demographics on college campuses, and so I did want to also take the opportunity to just say how impressed I am with your civic engagement and what you're doing. So congratulations, and you are an inspiration.
Thank you.
Thank you. One question I have, if you guys can think back to this, we've met with such a wide range of people, different backgrounds, ages, and everything on our coast-to-coast journey. And so that ranges from 18-year-olds who are incoming freshmen who have never voted to people who have been voting for 30, 40 years. But if y'all can think back to maybe the first time or first few times you voted, what did that feel like? What did that feel like? Did you feel that sense of empowerment, and see all the work that our ancestors put in for us to gain this right? Did that all kind of come rushing in at once? And what was that like heading into your next time's voting and everything?
Wow. Well, the first time I voted was in 1992, and it was actually it was a presidential election, Bill Clinton and the first George Bush, and it was a very interesting time. I mean, I was excited about voting. On my campus, I went to Kent State University in Ohio, and we were pretty, our Black United students was pretty politically engaged. At the time, there were actually, students on campus who were, protesting, the election. But there were many of us that, kind of recognized the significance of it. In 1992, I was going to say if you recall, you probably weren't even born at that time. But
I'm a 2002.
the first, this was on the heels of the first Iraq War. So that was one of the things that really motivated students that, and one of the things that, ushered in Clinton into the White House. But I remember being very, very excited about voting for the first time.
God, it's been so long. It's hard to remember. When I got a chance to vote, you had to be 21, so they hadn't passed the law that you could be 18 and vote. So I didn't vote till probably I was a senior in college because of the way the election cycle was, and so I think I might have been a junior or senior in college, and that was in the late. That was 1969 or something like that. But voting was so much a part of my family's life that I didn't really think about it being such an amazing event for me. My mother and father, we had a polling place in our house. Yes, because where I lived on 45th and Broadway, there was no park, no rec center, no library nearby, no place that you could gather. There was a school, but the school was full of kids, so the cafeteria was always full of kids. So my mother volunteered our house. She worked in the polls when we lived in the projects, in the Pueblos, and so we moved over to 45th Street, and they didn't have a place to vote. They were looking for a new polling place. She volunteered our house. And so all of my life, from the time I was like middle school or so, there was voting going on in my living room. And so I knew it would take place. I mean, we knew that when election came, we had to go out the back door and go around, walk down the driveway to go to school because people were in the front of the house. And my dad would not let them. People said that you can vote in the garage. My dad said, no, garages are nasty and dirty, and this is an important event. So he and my brother took the furniture out of the living room, put it in the back den, what have you, and then they would put the booths up in our living room. And so I saw voting from the time I was in middle school. And so that had an indelible impression on my mind. Wow. And my sisters and brothers, so all of us registered to vote, all of us voted, and we still do. But I saw it every day, and my parents always talked about it so much, and my dad didn't see it as a bother, like some people would be like, well, I got like a TV, and you're all in the room, and all this kind of stuff. My daddy was honored to basically set up the polling place in our living room. Wow. And my mother was known as the voting lady. Everybody came by our house. You go over there, that's the voting lady's house. We all go to her house to vote. And so I saw that happening in my living room, and people packaging up the ballots and taking them. My dad would drive them downtown LA and turn them in, and she did that until she passed away. So our house was, central to voting. And so us, it wasn't like a special thing, because we knew we were going to get a chance to vote eventually, and we knew where we were going to vote, in the living room, and so
Just roll out of bed.
roll out of bed and go vote, it was one of those kind of things. So I had that unique experience of having voting in our house.
Wow.
And so I grew up with this amazing concept that everybody should vote. And my daddy felt very strongly about people who didn't vote. When we lived in the projects, there were a lot of folks who were on social services, on welfare. My daddy would talk to them, and he would tell them, I don't know why in the world you don't vote. He said, your whole life is dependent upon the government. You get a check every month, And he would be talking to people about voting because he worked in the steel mills, and he just could not understand how people on welfare and those kinds of things didn't go vote. He said, these people making all kind of rules about your check and what you're going to get paid, and you're not even saying anything. So my dad was a strong advocate for voting because he was denied that opportunity in Arkansas. And so I just grew up with it. I don't even remember the first time I went. I just know that when I got 21, I registered to vote and had to have my birth certificate, whatever it was at the time, registered to vote, and then I voted from every election, from that election forward to every large, small, little city council, water board, whatever it was. I voted in every election.
How did you go about educating yourselves on voting, choosing the right candidate? What were your sources?
Well, you know what? It's like most folks in the very beginning, when you pick a candidate, even at just the local level, and things, you generally look to the trusted source. Most of us have never met the president, and those people, and the governor, and all those folks when you're starting off voting. But you start looking for trusted sources. You know that your city council person voted for so and so. Your city council person is recommending that, and then you can follow the work that they do. Mm-hmm. But oftentimes people will do that. I can tell you, I still have students who call me now every election, Dr. Weber, could you send me a copy of your ballot? Because they want to know what I'm voting for. Yeah. Because there's so many things on it you don't know, and so you look for the people to tell you what's good and what's bad, because oftentimes they're in the center and they understand all the propositions and the things that are coming out and so forth and so on. So all of us look for trusted sources. Anybody tells you they don't, not telling you the truth. We look for trusted sources, whether it's your Democratic Party or your Republican Party, whether it's somebody you look down the list. I have a lot of people look down the list of endorsements, like, oh, Shirley Weber's voting for so-and-so, that must be a good candidate. And then they'll investigate the situation.
And if I can ask this as well, first, both of you have been in California for about how many years?
God, I've been in California for 72 years.
Wow. Blessing.
And for me, just a little bit shorter than that. I've been in California for 22 years.
Just a tiny bit less.
Well, I asked that because I wanted to know your perspective on how the California political landscape has changed over time. I'm not very familiar with West Coast politics. We're from North Carolina, one of the best states, and Durham in particular, one of the best cities in the country. But with that, curious as to the political landscape, how that's changed, and then going into college campuses with the protesting that was seen all over the nation. How did it affect California?
Well, the overall political landscape of California over the years has changed dramatically. When you look at, even here in San Diego, there was at point, there would never be a Democrat elected mayor in San Diego. It's a very heavy red city in terms of Republicans. That shifted a lot when we changed the politics of San Diego, because our initial voting was like at large. So you would run for a seat in District 4, which is generally known as the Black and Brown District. But you'd win an opportunity to run in the general election. But then the main election that took place in November was everybody, which means your politics had to match the affluent Republicans, because they're going to turn out to vote more than the Democrats, okay? So once the politics was changed to district elections in San Diego, that's when we began to see the change in the city council. There used to be like one Democrat on the city council. Now I think there are 9. And we have 9 members, and I think all of them are Democrats at this point. But the shift came by basically just making sure that there was representation, and the structure of voting was accommodating that. Statewide, it's interesting, African Americans, we only have about 6% of the state population. which means you would think there wouldn't be a whole lot of us. But we have learned, I think, African Americans have learned how to represent everybody extremely well. And so as a result, we find black folks who are elected in all kinds of places. There are 12 members in the assembly right now, and there are 120 members. So 10%, and even though we're not with 6%, 10% of all of the elected officials in the legislature are African Americans, 10%. And of our constitutional officers that run statewide, there are 8 constitutional officers, and I'm like the third when there's a governor, lieutenant governor, and secretary of state. So there are 8 officers. Of the 8, 3 are African American.
Wow.
Statewide officers. Okay, so we have learned how to wield influence and power, how to mobilize, how to basically work in a collaborative way with others, and to how to get our message across. And so we've done that, and we've been working on it consistently. That's there. So the landscape has changed. California is unusual. It's over, I think, in our assembly, there are 80 members in the assembly. Of the 80, 65 or so are Democrats. Well over 2/3. They have a supermajority in the assembly and in the Senate in California. And all of the constitutional officers are Democrats.
Wow.
And on that point, I should also point out, because I don't think that Dr. Weber would, but we have a trailblazer, a political trailblazer in our midst. So Dr. Weber authored 2 bills that made California pioneers in these 2 particular areas. So she authored a bill, AB 1460, the Ethnic Studies Bill. So in any student in the California State University system who graduates must take a course in ethnic studies. So either Africana Studies, Chicano Studies, Asian American Studies, or Native American Studies. And so Dr. Weber, when she was in the assembly, she wrote that bill, and it changed the landscape of education in the California State University system. And then, of course, the reparations bill as well made California a pioneer in the reparations movement. Once that bill was passed in the assembly and signed into law by Governor Newsom, a task force was created to talk about reparations, and to figure out how reparations would be, how reparations would become a reality in California. Dr. Weber, she did that, so that was that's a part of California's landscape, and Secretary Dr. Shirley Weber is responsible for much of California's current political landscape right now.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And it can't be overstated how thankful we are to be with you. The fact that you're the first Black Secretary of State in California, and if I'm remembering correctly, one of 5 Black individuals to serve in the constitutional position under the governor. So it's absolutely incredible to be speaking with you. How does it feel existing in that space? In that space,
it's really it's something that I never had intended to become. I never intended to be first of all, I never intended to be an elected official. I was talked into running for the school board. Okay.
Who talked you into running?
The community.
Oh, wow.
The Dorothy Smiths, the George Walker Smith, all these former Black school board members, as well as leaders in the community, called me to run, and I said no. Well, let's find somebody else. I'm busy at the university. I don't have kind of time, and I went on about my business. And then about 3 months later, they called and said, "Okay, we're having a meeting about your campaign." I'm like, "Hold up, I didn't say I was going to run." And so it became the wish of the people. And the same thing with the assembly. I had retired and was getting ready to do some other things and having a good time, and I got a call from Sacramento, from Tony Atkins, who was becoming speaker, wanted me to run for the assembly. And I said, I don't have that kind of time. I don't want to do that. And she was like, I said, that's not something I want to do. And she was like, we have nobody like you in Sacramento, nobody. And K-12, post-secondary, you're a voice in this community. I want you to run, and I'm going to help you, one of those kind of things. And I thought about it, and I had basically said no. And then I went to some meetings where they were dismantling the universities in my mind in terms of the legislation being passed by a bunch of people who knew nothing about higher ed. And so I came down and told Shay, my administrative coordinator, okay, Shay, I'm gonna have to surrender. Call Tony, I'm gonna run. I said, you know, I can't take it anymore. These people are going crazy. And so I did that. And even with this becoming Secretary of State, this year was supposed to be the year that I actually turned out and retired from the legislature, the 2012, and 2024, and I was looking forward to it. And I got a call from the governor asking me would I be Secretary of State. The same friend, Tony Atkins, had been working behind the scenes because the Secretary of State had gone to Washington, and he had to appoint a person temporarily. And the people were clamoring for it, wanting the job. I was not one of those. I was advocating that they should put somebody black in the Senate. I was advocating for some other stuff. And here this comes at my door, and I was like, I'm not sure if I want to do this. And my family was like, why not? I said, well, you know, I don't run an agency and all this kind of, I don't know. And but I thought about my dad and my mom being so committed to voting. And I thought, well, this is really ironic that their daughter could be responsible for the largest voting base in the nation, you know, and here they were denied an opportunity to vote most of their lives.
Wow.
So I just thought, well, I'll do it for mom and dad, nothing else, you know. And it's been good. I mean, we've been able to do some good things. I still work with a lot of the legislation that's going on and across the street from my building. I've been able to hire an amazing group of people who have not often gotten the opportunity to serve and to serve well. I have a very diverse staff. That office had almost no African Americans in the office in the leadership role. Now we're there, you know, and we're doing a great job with what we do and up and down the state. So, you know, it's been a good experience. When I took the job, I thought I'd have 6 years. I thought I'd finish his 2 terms. I ran for re-election and I'd have 4 years. So I thought I could do 6 standing on my head. I discovered it's really 10. Okay, so because I was a month late being appointed, and as a result, unless you have a half of a term left, if you have a half a term, then that counts as a full term. Well, I had 11 months. No, I had 23 months left rather than a half of a term of 24 months. So I end up with the 23 months plus another 8 years. So we'll see, you know, we'll see if I go to 2028, but actually 2030, you know, as Secretary of State. There are few of us across the nation that are Secretaries of State. Many of them are appointed by the governor as appointments that are aligned with the governor's administration. There are only a few Secretary of States who actually elected on their own. So I'm not part of the governor's cabinet. I'm not a part of his. I have a whole separate agency, and I answer only to the people of California. And so it's a little different in that sense. And there are a few of us that are elected. I think there may be one other person recently, an African-American woman at one of the small states, who I think where is she from? Anyway, she's there in New Haven. Yeah, she's in New Haven, Connecticut. And she's just recently elected, but the rest of them some of them are appointed, but there are not that many African-American Secretary of States, maybe about 3 or 4 in the nation. Yeah, something like that, yeah.
Well, yeah. We thank you both so much for joining us today. Your words and wisdom was super inspiring as we're going on our coast-to-coast journey, and we hope you guys both enjoy the rest of your days and safe travels. I know you're busy traveling a lot, but we thank you so much for joining us today. Well,
thank you for what you're doing. And, you know, it's extremely important that people see young black men in their fraternity outfits.
Alpha Phi Alpha.
That's right, who are here, but most importantly, who have a commitment that the Alphas have always had for outreach and education. And it's great to see you here. I had a lot of people ask me, what is going to happen in this election with young black men? I said, we have to get out there and help them understand that this may be the lesser of 2 evils, but it is the lesser. And so choose it, and don't sit back and let somebody choose for you who you may not want and will not do you any good job for you. So people get upset over that, but I said, as black folks, we have always chosen the lesser of the evils, because we've never had a perfect choice.
Yeah.
Maybe one, but not a whole lot.
Wow. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, absolutely.